اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن آداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم إنهم مني وأنا منهم فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل يا رب أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك بعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال علي عليه السلام لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة فحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبين وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات. محمد و آل محمد. تمام مومنین سے گزارش ہے کہ جو باہر مینس ڈائننگ ہال میں اندر تشریف لائیں اور جس میں مجلس کو مجلس کا آغاز کیا جائے، اور ہو چکا ہے، اور آپ لوگ آئیں، اندر تشریف لائیں، اور جس میں آگے سلام مرثیہ کی میں شرکت کر سکیں. صلوات علی محمد و آل محمد. صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. اچھا، دیکھ لیں، چیک کر لیں، چیک کر لیں. بل محمد و آل محمد. صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. Mu'mineen out here in the dining hall, men's dining hall, are requested to come inside. The majlis has started already, and we just recited Hadith Qissa. We will continue with the Salam and Marsiya inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
Salawat. پھر زمانے نے اس کو سر پہ بٹھا رکھا ہے، پھر زمانے نے اس کو سر پہ بٹھا رکھا ہے، جس نے مظلوموں کی آہوں کو دبا رکھا ہے. اپنے کردار سے دنیا پہ حکومت کر لے، نیزوں کو خنجر و تلوار میں کیا رکھا ہے. گر تجھے جنگ سے خواہش ہے تو آ کر ببلا، شیر ایک شیر ترائی پہ بچھا رکھا ہے. اس کے ٹوٹے ہوئے نیزے سے لہو برسے گا، یہ الگ بات ہے کہ ہاتھوں کو کٹا رکھا ہے. سامنا نیزائے عباس سے ہوگا کیسے، ایک پہ شیر نے جب ہنس کے رلا رکھا ہے.
بل محمد و آل محمد. صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
صلوات. گزری جو ککل گاہ سے زینب جگر فگار، آنکھیں لہو تھیں، بگن پر غموں کا بار، لاشوں کو گیک کے روکیں زار کہہ کی کھجل گیا یا شاہ ذوالفقار. کیسے بتاؤں کیا میرے دل پر گزر گئی، لاشیں پہ بے وطن کے جو میں ننگے سر گئی. ہائے بابا غربت میں قتل ہو گیا مظلوم بے وطن. میں بھائی کہہ کی کھلاشا بہن میں بھائی کہہ کی کھلاشا بہن میں
کفن کفن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی لاشا بہن بہن آئی ناراش گو گھڑی پڑ گیس کی فضا کنبا شہید ہو گیا میرا گھر اجڑ گیا پڑ گیس گیس غیر کا اپنا وطن وطن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی کھلا شاہ بہن بہن ایک گن کے گاغ میں نے بہہ کر اٹھا لیے کچھ داغ میں نے قلب کے اندر چھپا لیے چھپ کے نہیں چھپانے سے داغ رسن رسن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی کھلا شاہ بہن بہن دیکھا ہے بابا میں نے جو منظر بتاؤں کیا نیزوں پہ رکھا ہوا سر ہر شہید کا گوروں کے گورنے سے کا ٹکڑے بدن بدن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی کھلا شاہ بہن بہن برچھی کا لے جائے علی اکبر میں جب لگی بابا کو دی صدا کبھی آواز مجھ کو دی کہتا تھا سینہ تھام کے ماں چھبن چھبن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی کھلا شاہ بہن بہن غازی کے بعد اور قیامت گزر گئی پیاسوں کی آس ٹوٹ کے بن میں بکھر گئی ایک شور اللہ کش کا بپا تھا گہن گہن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی کھلا شاہ بہن بہن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی کھلا شاہ بہن بہن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی کھلا شاہ بہن بہن غربت میں قطر ہو گیا مظلوم بے وطن میں بھائی بھائی کہہ کی کھلا شاہ بہن بہن ہائے بابا صلوات
ایک صلوات اور بھیجتے ہیں یہ چار مصرے امام سجاد کی مناسبت سے مولانا دیشا نگر جوادی کے صلوات بے روح کبھی اپنی عبادت نہیں کرتے کرتے ہم لوگ کوئی ایسی حماقت نہیں کرتے، ہم لوگ کوئی ایسی حماقت نہیں کرتے۔ اور یہ کیسے مسلمان ہیں جو سجدے میں پڑے ہیں، یہ کیسے مسلمان ہیں جو سجدے میں پڑے ہیں، اور سید سجاد سے الفت نہیں کرتے، اور سید سجاد سے الفت نہیں کرتے، بے روح کبھی صلوات بھی چار مصرے اور ہیں مولانا صاحب کی، ایک صلوات اور باقی نہ ہو تو کچھ فکر عقیدہ بھی کرو، باقی نہ ہو تو کچھ فکر عقیدہ بھی کرو، اور پورا اس اپنے عقیدے کا تقاضا بھی کرو، او حضرت سید سجاد سے الفت ہے اگر، وہ کبھی سجاد کے مسجود کا سجدہ بھی کرو، باقی نہ ہو تو صلوات بھائی ایک اور کشی زنا ضیائے خون شہیداں کی دلکشی زنا، حسینیت کے چراغ روشنی زنا، ضیائے خون شہیداں کی دلکشی زنا، اور کیا وہ راہ میں برتا رسول کی زنا، و عزائے شاہ سکی زینب، علی کے لال کلاشا تڑپ اٹھا اس دم، علی کے لال کلاشا تڑپ اٹھا اس دم، تمہارے بازو میں جس دم رسن بندھی زینب، اور کسی نے مارا جو پتھر تو چپ رہی، لیکن کہا جو باغی کسی نے تو رو پڑی زینب، اور لہو میں ڈوبی ہوئی بیڑیاں مہاری کی، لہو میں ڈوبی ہوئی بیڑیاں مہاری کی، سفر میں تھام کے دل دیکھتی رہی زینب، اور حسین چور تھے زخموں سے پھر بھی اٹھ بیٹھے، حسین چور تھے زخموں سے پھر بھی اٹھ بیٹھے، کہا جو شمر نے خیموں سے آ گئی زینب، اور حسینیت کو بقا اس لیے نثار ملی، حسینیت کو بقا اس لیے نثار ملی، یزیدیت کے مقابل نہیں جھکی زینب، ضیاء خون شہیداں کی دلکشی زینب، صلوات دیجیے۔
بارے دیگر صلوات اللہم صلی اللہ محمد
اللہم صلی اللہ آل محمد، سیاہ حضرت علی اکبر کی شان میں جو ہے بہت زمانے سے نہیں پڑھا میں. مالک سے بھرے گھر کے اجڑ جانے کا پوچھو، گھر والوں سے تفرقہ پڑ جانے کو پوچھو، ماں باپ سے قسمت کے بگڑ جانے کو پوچھو، شبیر سے اکبر کے بچھڑ جانے کو پوچھو، شبیر سے اکبر کے بچھڑ جانے کو پوچھو. او اللہ نہ دکھلائے علم نورے نظر کا، بہہ جاتا ہے آنکھوں سے لہو قلب و جگر، بہہ جاتا ہے آنکھوں سے لہو قلب و جگر. اور جس وقت کہ اکبر کو لگا زخم جگر کا، سینے میں رکا کے دم اس رش کے خمر کا، گرتے ہوئے گھوڑے سے خیال آیا پدر کا، چلائے کہ اب کچھ ہے دنیا سے پسر، چلائے کہ اب کچھ ہے دنیا سے پسر کا. او بے کس کی مسافر کی خبر لی، جیے بابا اپنے علی اکبر کی مدد کیجیے، اپنے علی اکبر کی مدد کیجیے بابا. اور بیٹے کی صدا سن کے ہوا صدمہ جاں کا، ایک ہو کلیجے میں اٹھی بیٹھ گئے شاہ، معلوم ہوا جان چلی آہ کے ہمراہ، دل تھام کے ہاتھوں سے کہا یا صد، دل تھام کے ہاتھوں سے کہا یا صد. رنگ اڑ گیا تھا گیسوں پہ گرد پڑی تھی، تیورا کے جو سنبھلے تو بصارت میں کمی، تیورا کے جو سنبھلے تو بصارت میں کمی تھی. اور چلائے بتا دو علی اکبر کدھر آئے، ڈھونڈے تمہیں بحر میں آنسوئے برائیں، بےتاب ہے دل قلب میں لشکر کے درائیں. تم اٹھ نہیں سکتے تو ہمیں لاش پر، تم اٹھ نہیں سکتے تو ہمیں لاش پر آئیں. او ماں باپ کے جینے کا مزہ لے گئے بیٹا، عہدہ جو تمہارا تو ہمیں دے گئے، عہدہ جو تمہارا تو ہمیں دے گئے بیٹا. اور لے آئی جو بیٹا بھی دل لاشے پسر پر، جھکتے ہی نظر پہلے پڑی زخم جگر پر، ایک تیر لگا قلب شہ جنوں بشر پر، سینے پہ کبھی ہاتھ کو مارا کبھی سر، سینے پہ کبھی ہاتھ کو مارا کبھی سر پر. اوپر کے دم اس شیر کو بھرتے ہوئے دیکھا، بابا نے جوان بیٹے کو مرتے ہوئے، بابا نے جوان ماں کو مرتے ہوئے دیکھا. چلائے شہیدی علی اکبر پدر آیا، اٹھو میرے پیارے میرے دلبر پدر آیا، تم ڈھونڈتے تھے اے مہے انور پدر آیا، ناشاد پدر بے کسبے پر پدر آیا، ناشاد پدر بے کسبے
پر پدر آیا،
اور کچھ دل کی کہو بات کرو ہوش میں آؤ، صدقے پدر آؤ میری آغوش میں آؤ، صدقے پدر آؤ میری آغوش میں آؤ، اور کچھ منہ سے تو بولو علی اکبر علی اکبر، آنکھوں کو تو کھولو علی اکبر علی اکبر، رخصت بھی تو ہولو علی اکبر علی اکبر، لو باپ کرو لو علی اکبر، لو باپ کرو لو علی
اکبر علی اکبر،
دولہا بھی آرام سے سوتے نہیں بیٹا، ہم روتے ہیں اور تم ہمیں روتے نہیں، ہم روتے ہیں اور تم ہمیں بیٹے نہیں بیٹا، یہ سنتے ہی بس آنکھوں سے آنسو ہوئے جاری، منہ پھیر کے دیکھا سوئے صحرا کئی باری، کی عرض حضور آئی ہے زہرا کی سواری، پھر درد اٹھا سینے میں اور غش ہوا، پھر درد اٹھا سینے میں اور غش ہوا جاری، کھولے ہوئے آنکھوں کو مسافر ہوئے اکبر، ہچکی کا بسانا کنگے وہ خیر ہوئے، ہچکی کا بسانا تھا کہ آخر ہوئے اکبر۔
صلوات. The sponsors of tonight's programs are the families of the Mr. and Mrs. Raza Mehdi Razvi, Hashim Himmati and Abbas Ali Zaidi. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of their family. Bismillah. Salawat. I would request you all to please recite 5 times Amma Yujib. There is a lady who is going to go through some surgery for her kidneys, and also there are people who are affected in Pakistan. Please recite 5 times Amma Yujib for their health and their benefit, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra iza da'a wa yakshifu as-su'u. 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 Amma yujibul mustarra iza da'a ويكشف الصعوب ويجعلكم خلفاء الأرض إلها مع الله قليلا ما تذكرون. صلوات. I was just informed that the cases for COVID has been more than doubled. The two area hospitals are overflowing. They have put tents outside, I believe, in the parking lot. So I request you all to please take proper precautions for your health and for the sake of the health of your brothers, sisters in this place. So please do take proper precautions, I urge you. And once again, I would like you to please come forward and donate for the upkeep of the programs at this institution. Lately, we have been inundated with a lot of demands, and I know these are the only trying times for all of us, and I know we can do that. And only in these times, that's when we are all feeling the pinch, that's when it's your dollar goes a long way. So there are donations for IMI's project here on our Tilmis Pavilion, and also the affected people in Pakistan. They are truly suffering. The government, I believe, is now trying to mobilize some help to them. So up till now, they didn't have any help coming there at all. So please do donate for that. You can give your checks to Sana, but make sure you write in the memo section for the Pakistan flood victims, or you can give it to MFI, or you can give it to IMI. You can give it to anybody, but it's every single dollar that you give really counts. I want to stress that I should make sure that you know that Maulana here, he's an environmental scientist. He works for the EPA, and he is very well versed in climate change and what's not going on. So let's, with a loud salawat, let's welcome him to the mimbar, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It is affecting.
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله وعلى بيتك المعصومين الأبرار الميامين المظلومين المضطهدين. السلام عليك وعلى ولدك المظلوم أبي عبد الله الحسين. يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، يا غريب يا مظلوم يا عطشان كربلاء، ما خاب والله من تمسك بكم، أمنا من لجأ والتجأ إليكم. يا ليتنا فيا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذا غشيهم موج كالظلل دعوا الله مخلصين له الدين فلما نجاهم إلى البر فمنهم مقتصد وما يجحد بآياتنا إلا كل ختار كفور آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. I mentioned to you yesterday about the growth of insan. And insan is a dynamic organism. It's a dynamic creature. Indeed, every creature is that way, that Allah has created. Every creature is not only created with a fitrah, with a nature inside of it, but every creature not only runs and functions based on that basic nature, what is embedded into its DNA, but it adapts to the environment in which it is living. And that is essentially what we see in the world. In every circumstance, every creation of Allah will adapt. And I'm sure there are doctors here, we have dentists here. One very nice example of this is the fact that what were the antibiotics of efficacy many decades ago today barely make a dent on the bacterium that is causing the disease. Hence, you get vancomycin resistance, you get different types of microbes that can withstand anything you throw at them, such that to be able to kill them, you have to in fact do damage on the human body at the same time. This is adaptation. Insan is no different. We are the same. Allah has made us in a certain way from our birth. Our genetics determine this. But you will see that if you take me, someone born in Toronto, Canada, lived the life that I had, if instead I was not born in Toronto, Canada, but instead I was born, let's say, in Russia, anywhere, South America, South Africa, in Pakistan, in India, somewhere else, would I be the same person I am sitting here today? I would not be. I would not be that same person. Because no matter what my genetics are, eventually there is an effect of the environment on you. And that is a very profound, powerful effect. It changes who you are. Not just in your early years, but believe me, you today, even though you were already adults when you came to the West, I guarantee if you had stayed in India, in Pakistan, you would be different people than you are today living in America. Because it is just the state of insan. We absorb everything around us and we change. So the beauty of Islam is not just that it teaches you about how to control your own nafs, to change your own state such that you follow the path of Allah. And that's why yesterday we talked that when they asked Allah, they were mukhlasina lahu deen. They said, Ya Allah, we are sincere on your path. That path of religion, is it not the same path here in America as it is in India or Pakistan or Afghanistan or Lebanon? Or does it different? In Lebanon, it's a different path. In America, it's a different path. No, it's the same path. It's just that the environment in which you are living, where you are trying to follow that path, that is different. Yes? So Islam says, okay, well, insan has these struggles, insan is going to learn and adapt, but Islam is also going to propose for you a code by which society, the world in which you live collectively, is going to remain strong, remain ingrained and embedded in the qualities, in the values, in the morality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided for us. And so let me ask this question. Today, how do we determine morality? What is the determination of morality? And you see that social scientists and historians, when they look at the world from its beginning, at least from its historical beginning, when we were taking records of how people lived, and up till now, what do you notice? You notice a few things about history. One is that things are cyclical. Everything is cyclical. I'm not talking about fashion and what people want to do in their daily lives. I'm talking about the behavior of insan. Yes? There are things that are cyclical. Just take, for example, the monarchies in Europe. Yes? How several monarchies many monarchies, not just in France. Yes, Marie Antoinette, what happened to her? She faced the guillotine. In the same way, the Tsar of Russia faced a popular revolt against him. Many, Shah of Iran, so many places. Here in the United States, against the monarchy in Britain, what they faced. There are cycles that go like this. And indeed, wasn't this the case against the Banu Umayyah? Banu Umayyah, eventually, they faced a popular revolt. Indeed, it was led by the Banu Abbas, using the name of the Ahl al-Bayt and the family relationship to Rasulullah to get support. But these cycles continue. And not only do these cycles continue, but you see that there are certain directions that life takes. So in society, there are a few things you will see. And by no means am I addressing this in a comprehensive manner. It is somewhat general, just to make my point so I can finish, inshallah. One is that how do you know which way society is going to go? One is by the resources. Yes? When you see societies that have lots of resources, you know where they're going to go towards. It is documented that the more resource you have, the more what you're also going to have. Wastage. You will also have a lot more wastage, yes? Just look at where we live today. There is more wastage, and if we're talking about environmentalism, think about all the waste that we produce. Just from throwing garbage into the ground, the plastics that we use, the styrofoam that we dump, that is going to go be buried in a hole somewhere, that's not going to biodegrade by any means. We will be dead and gone. Our grandchildren will be sitting on this earth having to deal with the consequences of what we were dumping decades earlier. Yes? So you see, with affluence comes lots and lots of wastage. Resources will determine this. Resources will determine which direction the society goes in. The other is sort of the philosophical leaning of the society. Today, in our country here, and by no means am I advocating one way or the other, or am I making a political statement, I am an apolitical human being. And so what I'm saying is merely just for discourse. That which way is our country here going in America? You have liberalism on one side and you have conservatism on the other, yes? And in the last few years, particularly in the last 6 or 7 years, the clash of these two has come to a head, has it not? To a very great degree. And what is the cause of that? Issues of morality, isn't it? Where one is saying that you are being immoral, the other is saying, no, you are not giving liberty. So how do we determine what's appropriate? What's moral versus what's liberality? What is freedom? What is allowed to be done? These questions exist in society, and they don't just exist here today, they existed at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Just take the example in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, that in the early years, what was a zeal, a vigor to stand by Rasulullah in the early days to fight against those attacking the Muslim nation, by the 9th year had changed to some degree. In the 9th year after Hijrah, what had happened? The previous year they had liberated Mecca, they had taken the house of Allah. Now the Muslim nation had grown, and not only from Medina to Mecca, but had spread. In the 9th year after Hijrah, you know the Roman army was descending to threaten the Muslim nation. And they stopped in a place called Tabuk, which is there today. They stopped in Tabuk. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he hears that they are coming. He calls the people. He says, look, we need the men to get ready to go out to face, to defend the Muslim ummah. Now, many came forward, as was the case in previous years. They came to the support of Rasulullah, the defense of the religion, the defense of their home, where they were. But do you know that at this point, many resisted? The strange thing is that there were some people who made some outlandish excuses, which maybe in previous years you didn't hear. One man, particularly in history, his name was Jad ibn Qais. Jad ibn Qais, he came to Rasulullah, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I cannot go with you out on this expedition to Tabuk. They asked, why can't you go? He said, because I'm very, I have great temptation towards women. And he says, when I see the Roman women, I will not be able to control myself. So that's why it's better for me to stay in my home in Medina and not go out to fight. Look at the excuses being used. Others, it was very hot at that time, and this call by Rasulullah to go out on expedition was occurring at a time when the farmers were just about to reap their crops. They had planted their seeds some months before, the plants had grown, they were about to pick the fruit or whatever it was close, and it was at that very time that Rasul said, we need to go. So they will come to Rasulullah, they will say, Ya Rasulullah, we want to go and fight, but really our crops need tending to. And if we don't tend to our crops, then they may die and they may perish. Excuse after excuse after excuse. So many of these types of excuses. Which, why? One might ask, because of the increase in resources, because of affluence, yes? So you see how the mind of insan changes. How the world in which you live changes that. So it's not just the resources, but the leaning of the society. The other thing that you see that is quite cyclical, that quite happens often in society, is that ways of thinking change. Ways of thinking change. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, when he started to preach his message, he was not just preaching the worship of Allah and the denial or the association of the idols with Allah, the adherence to his messengership, the following of religion. It was a difference in the way of thinking. If you see what Rasulullah was teaching, it was changing the mindset of people. And that's not easy because it's a change in culture, yes? Why do you think the way you do? It's because you're educated a certain way, because you were raised a certain way, but also because your culture tells you to think that way. Your culture has a big influence on what you think, yes? And that culture is what can strengthen your resolve on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when there is a conflict between what you think is correct based on your culture and what religion is telling you, then there's a problem. And imagine now Rasulullah is coming. So now for 23 years, he preaches this message over and over, over and over, over and over. He sacrifices, sacrifices, sacrifices. Not just himself, but his Ahl al-Bayt. And you see how the strength of that is maintained, yet when he dies, you see the events that transpire thereafter. And again, there's much to be talked about here, but just think about it from the perspective of people's thinking, what happens to them. 100 and approximately, let's say, 30 some odd years go by, okay? 120 some odd years go by, and we are in the time of Al-Imam As-Sadiq, okay? Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. In the time of Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, you know that Mansur al-Dawaniqi, after the Banu Umayyah had been overthrown, Mansur al-Dawaniqi, he saw Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam had established this school, that Al-Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam before had established this school. Thousands of students are coming. And they are learning the way of the Ahl al-Bayt, the knowledge of the Ahl al-Bayt. Whether they follow the Ahl al-Bayt or not is a different thing. But they were learning the knowledge of the Ahl al-Bayt. So what did he do? He said, we need to counter this way of thinking. We need to counter this movement that is being promoted and energized by Ja'far ibn Muhammad. So in a neighborhood of Baghdad called Karkh, he instituted like a school, meaning he paid money, he got some people to come, and he said, look, whatever you do, you must sort of rebut what Ja'far ibn Muhammad is teaching. Go against that to some degree. Challenge what they are doing. And hence you know what happened. That one day Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam is sitting, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. And who comes to see him? One of his students, yes? What was his name? Nu'man, Abu Hanifa, yes? You know, the history tells it. You know the whole thing. That when he comes, Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, I have heard that you have been applying your own opinion to the understanding and the derivation of what the Quran and the Sunnah are telling you. He says, yes. He says, I follow the Quran and the Sunnah, and when I cannot get a direct answer, I use my own analogy, I use qiyas. So Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam, he says, are you chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Has he sent you as a messenger? He says, no, I've not. He says, did he give you authority over his holy book, his law? He says, no. He says, have you been made a partner with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam? He says, no, I have not been made a partner. Imam Sadiq, he says, then what are you doing? From where do you get the authority to make analogy and then not only deceive your own self, but you are deluding and misguiding other people as well? Imagine, maybe let me stop here and say that this is maybe a warning of our Imam to us. That be very careful in what you think you know about your own religion. Don't assume. Take it from the authorities, those who have studied, who have determined, who have established themselves to know what the Quran is saying, what the Hadith is saying, and are deriving it based on the Nas, not their opinion. That is important. Because today, one of the biggest problems, and I'll say this very clearly, is that everybody has an opinion. Particularly our young people. I, yes, was born in the West, raised in the West, but we still were not that opinionated. Today, the young people have an opinion about everything. There is no such thing that we just accept and submit to the will of God. We submit because Rasulullah told us to submit. This is what it is. And so we question and we ask. And it is good to question. I'm not saying don't question and don't ask, but don't question out of defiance. Ask to learn. Submit first. Be obedient first. And then ask your question. Don't wait to be justified and then say, I will believe. No, belief comes first. Obedience comes first. Then comes the questioning. So now Abu Hanifa is asking the questions of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And you know this riwayah. You know the hadith that is described here. That he asks some questions. Imam as-Sadiq, he asks, he says, what is a graver act? The murder of somebody or adultery? Which is worse? And what does he say? Murdering is worse. He says, for a woman who cannot fast or pray, which is more important? Is fasting or prayer more important? What does he say? He says, salat is more important. Yes? And on and on. And what answer does he give him? He says, as for the issues that I have asked you the question about the murder or the adultery, if murder is worse, then why do you only need 2 witnesses for the murder and 4 for the adultery? If the prayer is more important for a woman in her monthly period, then why is it that she does not have to make up the prayer, but she has to make up the fast? You applied your analogy to this. Then he asks him a question. He says, do you analyze the Quran and give an answer? Abu Hanifa, he says, yes. Imam as-Sadiq, he says, tell me about the ayah of the Holy Quran, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. The ayah, it says, you will be asked on that day of judgment about the na'im, meaning the comforts of life, the gifts that Allah has given to you. What is Allah asking about? What is He going to question you about, judge you about? Abu Hanifa, he says, your wealth, your children, your property, all those things, your food, all the good things, the luxuries of life that Allah has given to you, you will be asked about it. Imam as-Sadiq, he says, this shows how much you know. It shows the limit of your knowledge. Abu Hanifa, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, tell me, explain to me then, what is it? He says, let me ask you a question. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, let me ask you a question. He says, if you were to go to somebody's house and they were to treat you like a guest, they will feed you, they will give you all the comforts, they will give you whatever you want to drink, whatever you want to eat, they'll make you comfortable. If they were to come after doing all of that for you and then hold it over your head and say, I did this for you, I did this for you, I did this for you, now you have to answer to me. What would you say about that host who had hosted you as a guest? Abu Hanifa, he says, I will think of them as miserly and stingy. I would not consider them to be generous if they gave to me and then held it over my head. Imam as-Sadiq, he says, you are very quick to say that about a human host. Now imagine applying that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give His servants food, water, drink, clothes, house, all of these things, children, and then on the day of judgment, He's going to ask you about it. He's going to question you. Understand what Imam is saying. It's not that you go and waste and you don't care, no. So then Abu Hanifa, he says, then what was he talking about? When he says, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ, when you will be questioned, what are you being asked about? Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, you will be asked about the love for Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And maybe this is the way in which Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam was saying that you will be asked about your iman, your faith. Those other things, yes, there is accountability. Imam is not saying no. But he says what Allah has given you as the greatest gift is your iman. You will be asked about that. But why do I make this point? Because it is very easy that just in 120 some odd, 130 some odd years, the interpretation of the Quran has changed this quickly. Yes? The way of thinking has changed so quickly. This is not a small little interpretational difference. It's not something small. It's fairly big. And then if you consider that there are wajibat in the Holy Quran, and I recited the ayah, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَأَنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِلرَّسُولِ وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. That know that anything you have acquired as ghanima, as a surplus that you have gotten, Allah gives what? 20%? A fifth of it. Now imagine there is something wajib in the Quran you have to do, and human interpretation has removed that from your life. Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Allah save us, yes? And how easily that can happen? Very quickly. This is society. Society does this. Society will change what you think, how you think. And you see its movement through the years. Not just 30, 40, 50 years, hundreds of years. That's why, let me say this very clearly. We are blessed to have the marja'iyya. Marja'iyya is the preservation of this. A lot of people will criticize the marja'iyya, that the marja'iyya is archaic, antiquated, that they have remained in the old days, thousands of years. My dear brothers and sisters, they have remained there because they're preserving something so valuable that they cannot allow it to change with the time. Yes? Let everything change. But they will hold this thing arced and anchored down so that no matter how much society changes, you will always be able to return to them so they can tell you what was the time from Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. Yes? Salawat ala Muhammad. So society is doing this. Society is changing. Society is continuously changing. And so the question is, and I asked this before, is how do we determine morality? Because in the end, action is determined by something inside of us. And it has to be us. The Holy Quran, what does it say? Allah, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah says, Allah will not change the state of insan, of human beings, until they take it upon themselves to change themselves, to change their own state, their own life, their own affairs, that they put it into their own control. That means the responsibility and the onus is on us. So what determines it? So they did, a theory was postulated some years ago by a group of psychologists. And again, I say this as a disclaimer, lest anyone think that I am a psychologist. I am not. I am not a psychologist. I just read and I try to see what people say. And so they describe what is called the moral foundation theory. Moral foundation theory, it basically wants to look at the cultural leanings of people, and to some degree the political leaning of people. Why do people behave a certain way? Why certain cultures are certain way, other cultures are different way. And they came up with this idea that there are a few things that drive a group of people to do what they do. And this is from the inside. It's not just from the outside, it's something inside of them that makes them do it. It's their culture, it's the way they do things. It is what prompts them to do it. It drives them to act in this way. So the first thing is a level of care. One is there are some groups of people who are determined by care versus neglect. So their culture is such that they have to care for other people. We often see that amongst ourselves, that we pride ourselves that we take care of our own, particularly the elderly, the orphans, the sick. This is the ethos of Islam, that you care and that becomes the moral foundation for who you are and how you behave. The other thing is fairness. So this group gives 5 or 6 things. The first is caring. Caring versus harming someone. You want to care for them, you don't want to harm them. The second thing is fairness. That there should be a sense of justice, yes? That there should be a sense of equity and equitability between people. Meaning, You don't take two people who are the same to you and judge one because one has some position over the other. You don't treat one wrong and the other one right. There should be a sense of fairness, and that sense of fairness will govern how you run society. The third thing they talk about sometimes, and these are things that are debated, I am just using it as a means of understanding and maybe us thinking about our own state, our own societies. The third thing is authority. So the first is caring, or care versus harm. The other is fairness versus cheating someone or mistreating someone. The third is authority and subjugation. Authority, we see this is a very common thing amongst many cultures. Even in our culture, yes, and when I say our, let's say the Indian Pakistani culture, or even the Iraqi culture, or the Lebanese culture, or Afghani culture, is there not a hierarchy of who is the authority? Yes, the eldest father or the grandfather has a position. Same goes in many communities. Many communities don't have this anymore. You will say in the West, oftentimes this is gone. This does not exist where there is an authority figure. So some systems create this sort of authority figure. Now the problem with that authority figure is that he or she, and I will say she because it could be a she, yes? We know in the history of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu was salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, how authority can be used to subvert a system or subvert what is happening in front of you. And I don't want to say anymore, there is no reason to say anymore. But that authority can be used to also change the minds of people. So they say one day, it is reported, a man from Kufa, he went to Damascus. He was a traveler, he was a businessman. He was on his camel, and he comes into Sham. He stops to go do his trade, he leaves his camel. A Shami man, a Syrian man comes and he takes the camel. When the Kufan man, the Iraqi man comes back, he says, what are you doing with my camel? The Syrian man, he says, no, this is my camel. This is my camel. He says, this is my she camel, the Syrian man. He says, it's a female camel, she's mine. The Kufan man is like astounded. He says, this is my camel. I just rode in on this camel. And it is a male camel, it is not a female camel. It is a he camel. I just came in, I tied it, and I went to do my work, and you are doing this? They said, take them to the judge. Take them to the judge. The Syrian man, he comes with 50 witnesses. He's Syrian, it's Damascus. He comes with 50 witnesses in front of who is the judge? Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. They come in front of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he's got 50 witnesses, and all 50 witnesses say, no, no, this is the Syrian's she camel. The Kufan man is standing there bewildered, saying, this is my camel, it's a male, I came riding in on it. Muawiyah, he says, given the witnesses and what they're saying, this camel is the Syrians. He judges and he sends the Syrian man with his stolen camel. A he camel that was professed to be a she camel. After that event, Muawiyah, he calls the Kufan man. He says, come. The Kufan man, he comes, he finds out from somebody how much was the cost of it. How much was the cost of this camel? The man tells him, he says, it's some amount of money. Muawiyah tells him, he says, take double the amount of that money and give it to the Kufan man. Now look, an injustice has been done, but now you're paying him off as well. He pays him off, he gives him double the amount. The Kufan man comes in front of him. The Kufan man, he says, look, it was a he camel, it was my camel. You are giving me money, double the amount of money, but you've stolen my camel. You've taken my camel. Muawiyah, he says, there's nothing we can do because the witnesses have already falsely witnessed. They've witnessed, but you know it is a false witness. Take the double amount of money I've given and go. As the man is leaving, the Kufan man, he calls him back. He says, come back. He says, you are going back to Kufa? He says, yes. He says, go to Ali ibn Abi Talib and tell him that I can bring 100,000 more men like this who will attest to this he camel to be a she camel. I will bring 100,000 more who will attest and lie and give a false witness that this he camel is a she camel. Go tell Ali ibn Abi Talib. That's how much power I have. He even would threaten that he can do Salat al-Jumu'ah on a Wednesday. Yes? Now I tell you, these are all stories we tell each other because we know what Muawiyah was. We don't say Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. No, we don't say that. We don't accept that. Muawiyah is nothing to us. He's nothing to us. We don't accept what others may think of him. But the point of his reflection and what he represents is still present today, no? That what does authority do? Authority can take the minds of people and swing the minds of people without you even knowing it. Yes? Why? Because they are part of your group. They are part of your identity. They are part. That's why I was even mentioning last night that why do people believe in false news? Things that are so outlandish that you will hear on certain news stations that nobody will believe. No one in their right mind will believe it. But certain people will believe it, and they will defend it till their last breath. Why? Because that's the voice of their group. That's the voice of their identity that's saying it. Yes? So see how the society changes. See how it is affected by authority, the power of that authority. The other things, the two things I mentioned already, these aspects to you, the care versus harm morality, the issues of fairness, the issues of authority, but then on top of that, sanctity. Some things that are sacred become the moral foundation for what you have. My dear brothers and sisters, that exists today for us, yes? It exists for us. That when you talk about Al-Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad, you are talking about something sacred, no? You're talking about something that is so sacred, so precious, that what does Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam say? Husaynun minni wa ana min al-Husayn. Ahabba Allah man ahabba Husayna. Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein. Allah loves anyone who loves Al-Hussein. That sacred position, you think that in the decades and hundreds of years of Arabia, in the month of Muharram, would they shed blood? Forget about Islam. Islam was not there. It was a sacred month in which what? No blood would be spread. No blood would be shed at all. Yet the grandson of Rasul is standing there on the 10th of Muharram. And how many years are we talking about after Rasulullah? How many years are we talking since his demise? Only 51 years, 50 years, yes? Nothing. That's nothing in the history of mankind. So you think 1400 years not going to change us? Not going to affect who we are? And I will come to my conclusion. So that is the other thing, is that you must understand that there are sacred things that anchor a society. Not only that, but liberty and loyalty, these last two. And I said this to you, that these 5 or 6 things, if you look at it, every community has it. What do we consider to be moral and sacred and ingrained into our society? And it is when they come at a head, you have trouble. Because now what do you do? And let me give you a real life example. And this is in the news, you can see it. There was a case in which a young police officer, all right, who had been training. When the young police officers, they come into a new, like a police station, a headquarters somewhere, they train with a more senior officer. So this police officer was training with the senior police officer. They will go out in the police car, they will patrol, etc. He would teach him the practical things of being a policeman. And the younger one, the trainee, the new police officer, had grown to feel a brotherhood with this more senior police officer because he treated him kindly. They sat and laughed together. Their families got together. One day, the senior police officer, he says, look, I know of a stash of money that is being held by a man who's doing illegal things. He's laundering some money. He's a crook. He's a thief, essentially. I know he has it hidden away. We are going to go in the middle of the night and rob him and take that money. This is a real life case. It happened here in the United States. We're going to go rob him, okay? We're going to take that money and we're going to keep it for ourselves. There are 4 of us. Myself and you, 2 other police officers who know about this. We're going to take this money and we're going to use it. And he explains, he says, on a police officer's salary, my pension, how can I provide for my children? How can I leave something for my family? I'm not being paid what I should be paid, so let me take this money and I will keep it. And I will not tell anybody because nobody knows it's there. It's stolen money, right? Nobody will miss it. But tell me, is that within the law? That's not within the law. That's illegal. He cannot do that. They cannot do that. Now the young police officer, he's idealistic. He starts to have a conflict in his mind. Between 2 things. Loyalty to the senior officer, who he now feels a brotherhood towards, and what? Doing what is just, what is fair. Two things that are now colliding with each other. What does he do? Should he stay loyal to the senior police officer? Or should he be just and report him secretly? Go and tell. Turns out, if you read the story, that he actually informed the FBI. He said, loyalty is not as important as justice here. Huh? Look, I'm telling you these things. I hope you are understanding my point. I hope you're understanding my point. That remember, there are things in society, in our lives, one is higher than the other. Loyalty is a good quality. It's a good quality to have, but not when it trumps justice. Fairness, caring, all of those things are good, but not when they trump justice, not when adala is at risk, yes? So he went, he worked it out with the FBI, he wore a wire, they caught them. Do you know what happened to this police officer? This young police officer who reported the senior one for doing this? He got death threats. His family got death threats. They threatened his daughter. For doing the right thing, he got threatened, yes? Strangely enough. Imagine, for doing the right thing, he got threatened. Now imagine Kufa in the time of Imam Hussein. Huh? Imagine Kufa in the time of Imam Hussein. And that justice, my dear brothers and sisters, is so important. And I will come to the end with the ayat of the Holy Quran that will hopefully explain to you. Yes? They say one day a man named Hassan al-Anbari, he had sent a letter to Imam al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And in this letter, he writes, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, I have sent you several letters and I have not received your permission. I have been asking you repeatedly that can I have your permission to go and work for the regime that is there, the Abbasi regime, the governorship, the government that is there. He says, I am in a dire state because they keep saying to me that you are not coming to work with us because you're a Shia of Ahl al-Bayt. And they are threatening me, they are worrying me that if I reveal myself or if they think that I am a Shia, that my life will be in danger, my property will be in danger. So do you give me permission to work with them in order to save myself? Al-Imam al-Rida, he writes a letter to him. He says to him, it appears that your circumstances are difficult. He says, realize one thing, that if you go and work for them, for this regime, this despotic regime, this corrupt regime, that you will be seen as one of them. You will automatically be seen as one of them. And however, he says, however, Imam al-Rida, he says, however, if you are placed in a position where you have authority, now look, see how the things come together. You are given authority, and now you're acting with authority. He says, you can act according to the Holy Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah, upholding Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. Imam tells him, you have position of authority, adhere to Quran, adhere to Sunnah, do Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahi anil Munkar. He says, in that position of authority, those who are beneath you, they will follow you. They will follow you. He says, realize, Imam Rida continues, he says, realize that in doing that good, you will be able to guide others. However, notice that in that position, with this despotic government you are working with, he says, if somebody comes to you who is poor, indigent, who has been trampled on, they are mazloom, he says, you should be tolerant, patient, and forbearing towards them. And he said, because of your position with this despotic, this zalim government, this oppressive government, you should take every opportunity to do as much good as you could possibly can. Why? Because you have to be able to counter the negativity of that government that you have become associated with. Finally, Imam, he finishes. He says, my last point to you is if you cannot do that, you cannot do overwhelming good, stand up for what is right, then you are not permitted to work with this government. You are not permitted. Why? Because even though you may have the authority, justice trumps everything, yes? Even though you have a high station in this government, if you cannot ensure that goodness is going to be done, justice is going to be maintained, you have to resign. You cannot participate with them. Hierarchy of Islam. And that's why even if you see the Quran, Holy Quran shows it perfectly, beautifully. And it does so by showing you two sides, always. and it asks a question. Quran will ask you a question. It will ask the question, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Ayah asks, it says, are those who know versus those who don't know the same? Knowledge is important, right? You want to pick someone who has knowledge. And not only who have knowledge, who have the know-how to do what is right, to apply it to your society, but the ayah asks another question. قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الْأَعْمَى وَالْبَصِيرُ. Are the blind and the ones who see the same? So it's not enough just that you have knowledge, but you have to have open eyes so you can see what is in front of you. So you're aware of the world. Is there any good to me having knowledge and I'm sitting in the corner not doing anything for anybody? I'm not aware of the world around me? There's no good to that knowledge. I have to have awareness. هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الْأَعْمَى وَالْبَصِيرُ. Are the blind and the ones who have vision, and this not just vision of the eyes, my dear brothers and sisters, vision of your heart, ahsant, vision of your heart to be able to see. It's not just about knowledge. You must also have vision. Then the ayah doesn't ask a question. In the previous two, I said it asked the question, are those who know the same as those who don't know? Are the ones who see the same as those who are blind? In this one, it says something completely different. It says, قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالْطَيِّبُ. It gives a statement. It doesn't ask a question. It says the one who is immoral is not the same as that who is pure. He doesn't ask a question here. He makes a statement that morality and immorality not the same. He's not letting you decide. He's telling you it's not the same. He's telling you that morality is decided by Allah and not by humanity. Morality, immorality, not the same. And then finally, he gives one ayah, beautiful ayah, in which he should awaken the hearts of insan. He says, وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا رَجُلَيْنِ أَحَدُهُمَا أَبْكَمْ لَا يَقْدِرُ عَلَى شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ كَلٌّ عَلَى مَوْلَاهُ أَيْنَمَا يُوَجِّهُ لَا يَأْتِ بِخَيْرٍ. The ayah, it says, Allah gives an example of two men. One of those men, he is absolutely useless. لَا يَقْدِرُ عَلَى شَيْءٍ. He cannot do anything. He is totally dependent on his master. Someone has to control his affairs, yes? Any which direction he is pointed to, he does not come with anything useful. Nothing useful will come out of him. The ayah, it finishes, it says, هَلْ يَسْتَوِي هُوَ وَمَنْ يَأْمُرْ بِالْعَدْلِ وَهُوَ عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Is that man who is useless, who doesn't do anything, he's totally dependent on everyone else, is he the same one who stands up for justice and is on the Sirat al-Mustaqim? They are not the same. They are not the same. Standing up for justice is a very different thing, but it means you actually have to stand. You actually have to do. You actually have to act. It's not just talking. So you see how the system is. My dear brothers and sisters, this is Karbala. This is the fight of Karbala. This is the struggle of Imam Hussein. That today, he says, your societies must be maintained with this. And that's why, what did he say? In kana deenu Muhammadin lam yastaqim illa biqatli, faya suyuf khudini. That if the religion of my grandfather Muhammad were not to stay standing, except with my death, except with my killing, my being killed, then swords, come and take me. Come and take me. And at that same moment, you know this, that when he stood on that hillock all alone, and what did he say? هل من ناصر ينصرنا؟ هل من ذاب يذب عن حرم رسول الله؟ هل من موحد يخاف الله فينا? Is there anyone to come to our support? Anyone who fears in the oneness of Allah, who will come and stand and defend the sanctity of Rasulullah's house? No, none of that mattered. But then the tent opened. The Rawi, he says, the tent opened, and one young sick man comes running out. One young man comes out yelling, Labbayka ya Aba, Labbayka ya ibn Rasulillah. When Imam Hussein turns and he sees Abul Hassan as-Sajjad running, he only calls one person. He says, Ya Ukhayya ya Zainab, ihbisih, ihbisih. Ya ukhayya ya Zainab. He calls Zainab al-Kubra. Huh? Who else will he turn to? He says, my sister Zainab, hold him back. لَإِلَّا تَخْلُ الْأَرْض مِن نَسَلِ آلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. So that the world will not be deprived of the children of Muhammad. Huh? They say she grabs him. She grabs the hands of Al-Imam al-Sajjad of Ali ibn al-Husayn. Al-Imam al-Sajjad, in all his sickness, all his fever, all his weakness, he says, Ya ammatah da'ini uqatil bayna yaday ibn Rasulillah. He says, my aunt, let go of my arm. Let me fight defending the grandson of Rasulullah. My dear brothers and sisters, 3 days went by after the day of Ashura. The bodies are there lying on the ground of Karbala. They say that the women of the Banu Asad had come, they saw, and they were ashamed at the behavior of their men. They chided them, they scolded them, that you are men, you have allowed the family of Rasulullah, the sons of Rasulullah, their bodies are left here. Go bury them. The men of the Banu Asad, they came, And the Rawi, he describes, it is reported, they come and they are afraid to come forward because they are worried that Umar ibn Sa'ad, la'natullahi alayhi's army will come back and will attack them. So they are waiting on the side. Finally, one of their men of the Banu Asad, he says, let us send someone to watch the road. And if someone is coming from Kufa, they will warn us and we will back away. The Banu Asad men, they send a man, now they come forward. As they start to look at these bodies, they don't know what to do. Until finally, they describe that we saw a rider coming from the direction of Kufa. They see the rider coming from Kufa. They say that he approaches slowly, coming towards the body of Al-Husayn. They describe that نزل من على ظهر فرسه ورمى بنفسه على جسد الحسين يشمه تارة ويقبله أخرى. The rider, he comes, gets down from the horse. He falls on the body of Al-Husayn, smelling the body of Al-Husayn, and sometimes kissing the body of Al-Husayn. The stranger from the desert, he raises his head. He says to the Banu Asad, why have you gathered in the desert? Why are you here? They say, we are only here to see what has happened. Finally, he asks them again, and they answer that we have come to bury these bodies. The stranger, he tells them, dig a grave on one side. He instructs them to make another grave a little further away. And then a single grave is marked at a distance away from those other two large graves. The men of the Banu Asad, they say that we took the bodies of the family of Al-Husayn and buried them in one of the graves. Then we took the bodies of the companions of Al-Husayn and buried them in the other large grave. All of them except for the body of Habib ibn Madahir. Habib ibn Madahir's grave was by itself. Habib was buried in that grave. Then finally, they went to the body of Al-Husayn. The stranger, he said to them, no, move back. I will bury him myself. The Banu Asad, they say, we tried to bury him, we could not lift the body. We could not. How are you going to bury him by yourself? The stranger, he says to them, Inna ma'i man yu'inuni alayh. I have some who will come and help me with the body of Al-Husayn. فجلس على الأرض ووضع يداه تحت الحسين. he put his arms under the body of Al-Hussein. He said, Bismillah wa billah wa fi sabilillah wa ala millati rasulillah. هذا ما وعد الله ورسوله وصدق الله ورسوله ما شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. This is what Allah and His Rasul have promised. And surely Allah and His Rasul are truthful. Finally, they dig the grave for the body of Al-Hussein. He looks at the Bani Asad, the stranger. He says to them, Ilayya bihasira. Give me a mat to place on the ground. They ask him, what do you need the mat for? He says, لأجمع به أوصال الحسين. Give me the mat so I can collect the broken pieces of Al-Hussein's body. The finger that has been cut for the stealing of the ring. One by one, the stranger, he puts the body of Al-Imam Al-Hussein on the hasira, on the mat, and then he descends him down into the grave. The Banu Asad, they say, فَوَضَعَ خَدَّهُ عَلَى نَحْرِ الْحُسَيْنِ. My dear brothers and sisters, when your loved one dies, you are near the body of your loved one. You put your cheek on their cheek before they are carried in the coffin to the grave. But there is no head of Al-Hussein on the body. So Al-Imam Al-Sajjad puts his cheek on the neck of his father, Al-Hussein. He says, طُوبَى لِأَرْضٍ تضمنت جسدك الشريف أما الدنيا فبعدك مظلمة وأما الآخرة فبنورك مشرقة. My father, this earth that is going to hold your body, it is lucky, it is fortunate to hold you, Ya Hussein. The earth, the life of this world is dark, and the akhirah is enlightened with your nur, my father, Ya Hussein. Amma huzni fasarmad, wa amma layli famusahad. حتى يجمع الله بيني وبين أهل بيتي. All my sorrow will continue. The darkness of my night will continue. They say that the grave of Al-Imam Al-Hussein is covered. It is covered with the dirt. Al-Imam Al-Sajjad, using his finger, he writes on the dirt of the grave, هذا قبر الحسين بن علي الذي قتلوه عطشانا غريبا. This is the grave of Al-Hussein ibn Ali, the one who they killed thirsty and oppressed. Al-Imam Al-Sajjad, he took the Banu Asad. They told him there is one more body near the river, near the Mashra'a, near the Alqami. They came to the body. They said, what could we do? When we picked up one side of the body of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, the other side will fall to the ground. If we try to lift him from the other side, the former side will fall on the ground. Al-Imam Al-Sajjad, he says, على الدنيا على الدنيا بعدك العفايا قمر العشيرة يا عمي يا أبا الفضل العباس. There is no good in this life after you, my uncle, يا أبا الفضل العباس. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. اللهم إنا نسألك بحق محمد وأنت المحمود، وبحق علي وأنت العلي الأعلى، وبحق فاطمة وأنت فاطر السماوات والأرض، وبحق الحسن وأنت المحسن، وبحق الحسين الشهيد وأنت قديم الإحسان. اللهم إنا نسألك بغربة الحسين وبعطش الحسين وبدم الحسين فرج عنا يا الله فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر وهو أقرب من ذلك، وافرغ علينا صبرا وتوفنا مسلمين. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
شبیر گونگتا ہے اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے اکبر کہاں، شبیر گونگتا ہے اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، بیکے کے قاتلوں سے یہ باپ پوچھتا ہے اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر ایک نہ ضعیف ہو گیا آقا نہیں نظر، آتا نہیں نظر، اکبر کے لاش سے یوں ہی کہتا گزر گیا ہے، اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے اکبر، خم آ گیا کمر میں جا کا نہیں چلا، جا کا نہیں چلا، بازو کے بل چلا ہونٹوں پہ یہ سگا ہے، اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے اکبر، اٹھنے کی کوششوں میں جاموں کے بل گرا، جاموں کے بل گرا، ایک کانپ کی آواز میں عابد نے جب سنا ہے، اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر اکبر آیا جو پاش لاش کے آتا نہیں یقین، آتا نہیں یقین، پرچھی پہ حق ہے مگر شبیر سوچتا ہے، اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے، شبیر گونگتا ہے، بیٹے کے قاتلوں سے یہ باپ پوچھتا ہے اکبر کہاں گرا ہے، شبیر ڈھونڈتا ہے یا حسین.
یا حسین. میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں، میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا. میں ایک بے بس پردیسی ہوں، میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا. میں ایک بے بس پردیسی ہوں، آؤں گا. میں ایک بے بس پردیسی ہوں، میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا. میں بس پردیسی ہوں، میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا. میں ساتھ پھوپھی کے اے بابا، میں ساتھ پھوپھی کہ اے بابا قرآن سناؤں گا. میں ایک بے بس پر لوٹ کے آؤں گا. میں ایک بے بس میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا. ہو تم پہ سلام میرے اے میرے غریب پدر، ایک قافلہ تھا تیرا ایک میں بھی چلا لے کر. میں ابن حسین ہوں اے بابا، میں اے بابا ظالم کو بتاؤں گا. میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں، میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا. میں ایک لوٹ کے آؤں گا. ایک رسی میں بابا ہے 12 گلے ہوں گے، سب چھوٹے بڑے بابا ایک ساتھ بندھے ہوں گے. محفل سے گرتے بچوں کو، محفل سے گرتے بچوں کو سینے سے لگاؤں گا. میں ایک بے پردیسی ہوں، میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا. میں ایک بے بس پردیسی کے آؤں گا. زینب کو بن چادر جب دیکھ نہ پاؤ گے، تم نو کے سنا سے پھر قرآن سناؤ گے. آواز میں تیری اے بابا، آواز اے بابا آواز ملاؤں گا. میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں، میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا. میں ایک لوٹ کے آؤں گا. مانگے گا سکینہ کو ایک شام کنیزی میں، مر جاؤں گا میں بابا سن کر یہ یتیمی میں. زہرا کی شبی کو اے بابا، زہرا کو اے بابا ظالم سے بچاؤں گا. میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں، میں یہاں ہوں گا. میں ایک لوٹ کے آؤں گا. یا حسین.
یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین، حسین. سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے.
سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے، وہ شام وہ کوفے کی گلی، وہ شام وہ کوفے کی گلی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی، دروازہ زہرا تو کبھی خیمہ شبیر، دروازہ زہرا تو کبھی خیمہ شبیر، شولوں میں گھری آل نبی، شولوں میں گھری آل نبی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی، شبیر کو اکبر کا جگر یاد رہے گا، شبیر کو اکبر کا جگر یاد رہے گا، زینب کی وہ خیموں میں غشی، زینب کی وہ خیموں میں غشی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد، ہر لمحہ مصائب میں گرفتار بہن کو، ہر لمحہ مصائب میں گرفتار بہن کو، خنجر کے تلے حلق اخی، خنجر کے تلے حلق اخی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی، جس وقت ملے گا ہمیں پیمانہ کوثر، جس وقت ملے گا ہمیں پیمانہ کوثر، شبیر تیری تشنہ لبی، شبیر تیری تشنہ لبی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، وہ شام وہ کوفے کی گلی، وہ شام وہ کوفے کی گلی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، سجاد کو وہ غم کی گھڑی یاد رہے گی، شام کا بازار تھا اور شام کا
صلی اللہ علیہ یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیک یا نبی اللہ، السلام علیک یا حبیب اللہ، السلام علیک یا امین اللہ، السلام علیک یا خاتم النبیین والمرسلین، السلام علیک یا ابا الحسن علی ابن ابی طالب امیر المومنین، السلام علیک یا فاطمہ سیدت نساء العالمین، السلام علیک یا ابا محمد الحسن بن علی، السلام علیک یا ابا عبداللہ الحسین، السلام علیک یا ابا عبداللہ وعلی الارواح التي حلت بفنائک، علیک منی سلام اللہ علیک منی سلام اللہ ابدا ما بقیت وبقی اللیل والنہار ولا جعلہ اللہ آخر العہد منی لزیارتکم، السلام علی الحسین وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، السلام عليكم أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة القائم المهدي، السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، عجل الله فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمین.
بہنوں کو سکینہ کی دعاؤں کا اثر دے. مولا تجھے زینب کی اسیری کی قسم ہے، بے جرم اسیروں کو رہائی کی خبر دے. جو چادر زینب کے زار مولا محفوظ رہے ایسے خواتین کے پردے. جو دین کے کام آئے وہ اولاد عطا کر، جو مجھے سے شبیر کی خاطر ہو کر دے. مفلس فضلال و جواہر کے بارش مخروض کا ہر خرچ ادا غیب سے کر دے. غم کوئی نہ دے ہم کو سوائے غم شبیر، غم کو